Warning: Damian Andrews' growing revenue and profit, if implemented, will put more money in your pocket. Please use with caution.
Welcome to Damian Andrews' Growing Revenue and Profit with international speaker and revenue and growth specialist, Damian Andrews. This is your source for practical, usable, and simple action steps that you can do every day to put more money in your pocket. And now, the host of Damian Andrews' Growing Revenue and Profit, Damian Andrews.
And the crowd cheers wildly to the trumpeting sounds of elephants sliding through eyes of needles. This is Damian Andrews' Growing Revenue and Profit, the program that deals with all things that put more cash in your pocket. This is the show that handles your revenue riddles, your profit puzzles, your operational oddities, and your culture conundrums. I'm the one, the only Damian Andrews, and in this show we are talking about adapting to change. Now, how you respond to change has a massive ability on your actual ability to grow revenue and profit. Now, why is that? Why do people not like change? Well, there's a loss of control, and people need to feel secure. And that causes stress. There's also concerns about competence. So when you change something, people have to deal with new situations. They might not think they have the skill. And again, this leads to stress. There might be more work to do. They're not sure what they've got to do. They've got to come to terms with things. And you guessed it, more stress. And then they might need to learn something new. Now, a lot of people don't like learning new things. That can cause a bit of stress. And then on top of that, add into it, you might find that there's lack of trust in the decision makers, which, as you guessed it, can lead to more stress. So change means, it's all a little bit different. And whilst we have this need for uncertainty, we like surprises, but we like the surprises that we know what we're going to get. So like if you have your birthday and people surprise you with a party or give you surprise presents, we like those kind of surprises. But if you have a uncertain surprise, like maybe you get served with a notice from the police or from a court, that might not be such a surprise that you like. And we have this need for certainty. Certainty gives us a bit of security, a bit of safety. And that dates back to prehistoric days. As we're evolving, we have this thing where, like, if you were hunting and there was a cave and there's potentially food in that cave, there's the excitement of going in there, but there's also the uncertainty, maybe there's a bear in there and you go into the cave and you get eaten. So this is where it's important to create that certainty. And this is someone that can really manage that change well, so people feel comfortable, can really grow their revenue and profit. And this is really critical in today's world, because today we live in a constantly changing world. We always have, and you have to evolve to grow. And as we're doing this, this simple maintaining your current level of revenue and profit, just as simply as maintaining your current level of revenue and profit, requires that you change. You have to evolve just to stay with the competition. If you stagnate and don't change, then you're going to be falling behind your competition. And if you really want to grow your revenue and profit, you really have to be ahead of the curve here. You need to anticipate change, and you need to adapt and be ahead of it, ahead of time. So that's what we're dealing with in today's show. So let's move on to the news. What have we got in the news? Well, I've got this article I've got here from, it's Rivers Miller's owner, Mosaic Brands. One of the country's biggest retailers may close up to 500 stores in the next 12 to 24 months. The Retail Juggernaut, which owns many popular fashion chains including Rivers, Miller's, Katie's, 90B, and Crossroads, has reported a staggering loss of $45.8 million. But while the company enjoyed strong and accelerating online digital department store sales of $93.7 million for the year, it also unveiled a drastic store reduction program that could see 300 to 500 stores vanish over the coming 24 months, depending on lease negotiations. Now, Mosaic Brands Managing Director and CEO Scott Evans said the group had been progressively reducing its exposure to long-term leases over the past 3 years. So this is not new. And around 41% of current leases either on holdover or due to expire by December. The retail rental market in Australia is not paused because of the pandemic. And for those of you watching sometime in the future, we're probably 6 months into the COVID-19 pandemic. And here in Australia, in Victoria and Melbourne, we have a current lockdown whereby retail stores are completely shut. So it's fundamentally changed for the future. So what he's saying is the retail market in Australia is not paused because of the pandemic. It has fundamentally changed for the future, he said. Some, though not all landlords accept the reality, with exact locations and numbers yet to be determined. However, Mr. Evans noted the results did not reflect the consistent growth the group has achieved over the past 4 years. The first third of the financial year saw the business perform solidly, he said. That forecast was utterly derailed by the devastating bushfires, which impacted 20% of our store portfolio over the Christmas period, then by COVID-19, which saw us close all 1,300 stores for 9.5 weeks. And that was back in the first part of that. They've now closed again. Also during the peak Mother's Day period, he said. There's no roadmap to navigate these circumstances, but our operational priorities have been ensuring team and customer safety, reducing inventory, and maintaining a strong cash position. Now, what he says there is really interesting when you think about that. Now, we've gone through some traumatic changes this year. With COVID-19, it's completely changed the way the world operates. And you really need to think about that. But what it really stands out for me is that, what it's done is it's really forced a lot of changes that people could have made but didn't. What they've now done is stuck in a situation where it's like either change or I don't survive. And this is really critical to understand from your perspective, to know that deep inside you can make those changes. So what we need to do is work out, how we can do these changes. So what are we standing here looking at? Well, he said it's fundamentally changed for the future. So what has changed? Now, I was on a call with a video call, as we do now, with a friend of mine who has an accounting business. Now, he has 120 staff who he housed in the office. They all come to the office like most people do, worked in the office, went home, and that was how it operated. We're on a video conference, and he has said, he's looking around his office going, look, here, I've got office space for 120 people. Now, in this environment, they've always had the ability to work from home. All his staff had the ability to work from home. Yet, most people would come into the office because that's what was done. Now, with the COVID-19 environment, people must work at home, and that's what they've been doing. So they've been utilizing resources that have been in existence for some time. And what he said was, not only are they much more productive, he said the employees are much more productive. They're doing more work. They seem to be happier. A lot of people, and I know myself included, is working from home. I get to spend a lot more time with my son than I otherwise would have. So he said there's a lot more productivity. They're getting more work done. And there's a different rationale for managing how your employees work when you're not looking over their shoulder. There's different types of management. One involves looking over people's shoulders, and the other is setting very specific outcome-driven goals so that people can work to that and they work at their own rhythm. So, and he had a very strong systems in place that allowed that working from home without being supervised so that they can do fantastic work. And he looked around his office as we're on this video call and he said, I've got space for 120 people here. Everyone's performing better. I've got 3 people in the office at the moment. Do I need space for 120 people? Now, this is one business with 120 employees. How many other organizations are going through that discussion at the moment? The retail leases or the leasehold that they were paying commercial, whether it's retailers in the case of our Mosaic Brands. And, there's a lot of cost in that of maintaining these properties, which now they're realizing they don't need to do. They always had the ability to. And this is where, again, coming back to this article, that, it's fundamentally changed for the future. Is that new? There's a lot of companies, when you look at your bigger, for example, your Apples or your other IT companies, when they have their call centers, a lot of those people work at home. They have, they log in, they've got the people, when people ring the call center, it diverts to the person's home who answers the phone. And this, again, saves a lot of money for a company. So you can't see them going back after this environment to the previous way of doing things, of having lots of leasehold property, which is very expensive, when they can do it at home. And not only is it people working at home, but they're enjoying their time much more than they were doing before. It's also interesting to note, though, when we talk about this environment, the internet has been around for a long time now, and you probably have heard and seen people that have adapted to that. A lot of people have made a lot of money creating their own little stores, running an internet business. They can buy things. Amazon has done a great deal of support for companies where they can actually manage, their stock and other items that they need to manage. Then you've got Shopify, which manages the online part of that. So people can actually do that and manage that well. And that is happening a lot now with bigger retail stores. They've actually jumped on that bandwagon as well and are developing a much stronger online presence where they can actually support their customers, give them a high quality service while at the same time saving costs. So again, adapting to change. How do we deal with that? What are we looking at here? The one thing that really hasn't changed, and a lot of people go, how do I deal with it? How do I relate to my customers? And it comes down to the same things. The fundamental principles haven't changed. You need to look after your customers. That has not changed. Way back when trading first started, if you looked after your customers, took good care of them, they would come back. Same token, the medium has changed as to how we actually deliver what we're delivering. So now, instead of being a storefront, we've actually got people coming to our online storefront. So from there, they can then deliver their, see what's available, buy it, have it delivered. Hopefully it comes in a reasonable time frame, nicely packaged. And the other advantage is, you're not limited now. Whereas before, if you had a storefront, you were kind of limited from a bricks and mortar store. You were limited to people that were roughly in your location. Not many people would travel from another state just to come to your store. That'd be very rare. Whereas the opportunity now is you can actually reach people globally. You can sell your products and wares globally to other people all around the world by developing that customer relationship. So the medium has changed. The fundamental principles that you need to put in place haven't changed. And these are something to really come back when we talk about this stress that people feel. When you're starting to feel that stress, stop and have a think about it. Hang on a minute. What's changed here? What's changed is how I do business. But people are people. People have not changed for hundreds of years, thousands of years. we all still have the same needs. Again, we want to feel that need for certainty. So creating that need for certainty is that when they come to your store, whether it's online or in person, that they know what they're going to get. They know what the service is. And this all links to your brand. Your brand is not just your logo. Your brand is how you interact, how you deal with people, the language that you use. And we noticed that, for example, Apple's a great example of that. I mean, Apple was always the rebel brand. So people were coming to Apple that were a bit of a rebel, and that's how they identified with their customers, and customers were similar to that. Also, too, they created a connection to people that are a little bit more creative. And we remember, I'm a Mac, I'm a PC ads, and just highlighted the difference between, the little bit more relaxed, creative type person was a Mac user, and someone that was more of a precision office worker used a PC. And so that's the other element of your branding. You really want to tap into what your customer needs and wants. This is really important, because if you start aiming outside of that, again, dealing with the change side of things, it's going to hurt you, because you're too busy focused on what are the technical aspects and the technical things you should do, whereas you really need to step back and focus on strategy. And what's strategy? Strategy links to what are the fundamental underlying needs that are important. That's what you want to identify. So when we're looking at the news and how the change in here, and this is really where it does stand out, that he talks about it's fundamentally changed for the future, but it talks about how this has been happening for the past 3 to 4 years already. So the COVID environment didn't really change their process. That had already happened. The internet did that. And we will constantly deal with changes going forward. The other thing that stands out for me in this article is that he says some, though not all landlords, accept that reality. And this is something to be aware of too. There are people out there that don't accept that change is coming. And a friend of mine who had a packing business and he actually had a little robot machine that developed the tube, the tubes when you send parcels. Well, he had that. And he brought that to the market, and he was much, much more efficient in how he operated. So he was able to deliver a higher quality product at a much lower price. There was another player in the market, well, there were several other players in the market, but they disappeared. And there was one player left, and there was one customer that he couldn't break. And this one customer would always buy from the other person, even though he was paying more, and it was not the quality wasn't there, but they had that relationship. And that's important to remember when you're dealing with customers. Sometimes some will accept it, some won't. So thinking about change, remember underlying that when you're dealing with change, a lot of it has to do with addressing stress. Because most people, if you're going to really grow your revenue and profit, you need to keep your team aligned and moving forward and focused together. And that means removing stress so they can stay focused on what they need to do, and then you can move forward with your business. So we're going to take a break, and we'll be back on the other side with our inspiring person. We'll talk to you soon. I wanted to create something special for the people who subscribe to the Growing Revenue and Profit newsletter. So, there are hidden pages at damianandrews.com. These pages contain exclusive material which will help you grow your revenue and profit, and it's simple to access. All you need to do is subscribe to the Growing Revenue and Profit newsletter. Each newsletter contains a link to these hidden pages. There are no passwords needed. Simply sign up for the newsletter at damianandrews.com and you can join our community. Hello and welcome back. And yes, so today's inspiring person, can you guess? Who am I? I was born in Chicago in 1901 to parents of German and English descent and was one of 5 children. The family moved to Missouri, and living near Santa Fe Railway as a young child became really enamored with trains. In 1911, a school friend introduced our young protagonist, if I could say that correctly, can't speak properly today, to vaudeville and motion pictures. Getting up at 4:38 a.m. with their older brother to deliver the times and then after school delivering the Star newspaper. So very, very active. Unfortunately, the exhausting schedule had a negative impact on their schooling, and they're often falling asleep in class, resulting in poor grades for the next 6 years while they were doing this paper route. In mid-2018, they attempted to join the army to join World War I, but failed because they were too young. Not giving up, after forging their birth certificate, the date of birth on that, they were able to join the Red Cross as an ambulance driver and were shipped over to France, but arrived after the armistice. So on return to Kansas, they got an apprenticeship, but was soon laid off and told doesn't have the creative skills needed. Started the first business, which failed to attract customers, so returned to employment. Innovation in that business, so they innovated in the business, come with a really unique innovation, but the innovation was rejected by the business owner. So they started another business. They went out and that business actually started to grow and take off, which was really great. And they were hiring more and more employees, but it was short-lived. Income was not enough to keep the company afloat, and it went insolvent. It went bankrupt. Next, they moved to Hollywood, and this is where, with his brother, they founded Disney Brothers Studio, which became the Walt Disney Company. And in 2019, Disney had revenue of $11 billion and held $193 billion in total assets. So, of course, I'm talking about Walt Disney. So let me fill in the blanks of that story. At age 4, he was paid to draw a horse of a retired neighborhood doctor. And he practiced drawing by copying cartoons from the front page of a local newspaper. At school, even though he fell asleep during the week, on Saturdays he attended classes at the Kansas City Art Institute and also took a cartoon correspondence course. At high school, he became a cartoonist for the local newspaper, and at night did night courses at the Chicago Academy of Fine Arts. Then when he was in France, he went there in the Red Cross and had an ambulance. He drew cartoons on the side of his ambulance to entertain people. And he also had some of his work published in the Army newspaper. His apprenticeship back in Kansas was drawing commercial illustrations for advertising, theatre programs, and catalogues. Now, some of those key points that stand out, some key points that stand out to me anyway, was that Walt loved doing what he was doing all the way through. So that was his passion. When you're doing your passion, you're driven to continue, even when things don't go well. And as you said, he had 2 failed business adventures, but he still continued on. And some people identify their passion really early, as was the case with Walt Disney. Others, sometimes they take a little bit longer to identify their passion. If you look at the other side of the coin, we have Colonel Sanders. It was only when he retired at age 60 did he really work out what he wanted to do. The other aspect that really stands out for me is that you really need to believe in yourself. And that's one aspect that really stands out here. And what I think really helped with that was at age 4, as we talked about, Walt was paid to draw a horse for his neighbor. Now, that was probably the foundation for his passion. When you think about that, here he was, 4 years old, asked to draw a horse for his neighbor, who's a doctor, so very prestigious man, retired doctor, and said, we'll pay you to draw this horse. So he would have got a lot of really strong recognition from those people around him. No doubt people were saying, hey, what a wonderful job you did there, because obviously he was paid. So he must have got a lot of recognition. And this is really important when, from your perspective, if you're having children or you're planning to have children, if you've got children, especially young children, there was a study that was done. What they did was they wanted to identify what was the one key factor. Was there a linking factor between people that are truly exceptional, that do amazing results? And they studied a whole bunch of people that really excelled, from really successful business people right through to like Steven Spielberg, all those kind of people that really, really stood out, and it did exceptionally well across a whole bunch of things. You've got Steven Spielberg, Eddie Van Halen from the music background, and they went through and they tried to work out what was one thing that stood out. After, I think it was about 260 different criteria that they went through, they found one category that they all had in common. And what that category was that one of their parents, and generally it was the parent of the opposite sex. So if it was, Steven Spielberg, it was his mum. The parent of the opposite sex had this unwavering belief in the child's ability. So if the child said, hey, I want to do this, the parent would have said, oh, wow, you do an amazing job. It was never questions, oh, you should have a backup plan or whatever. They just had this unyielding belief. And where that probably comes from, building that foundation, when you're talking about a young child, from the ages when they can speak, 1 to 2, or 3, depending on their age, right through to say about 6 or 7. At that age, they're very impressionable, and it's not about their career. If they say they want to be a garbage delivery person, it's not about whether the child wants to be a career. It's about the parent's belief in their ability. So when the child comes to you and says, hey, I'm going to do this, coming back with that, yeah, you'll be the best that you can be. You'll be amazing. You'll deliver a wonderful job. That develops a confidence in their own ability to succeed. And this is what I think young Walt had from that very early age. He was, paid to draw a horse for his neighbor who was a doctor, very prestigious, and from that, he would have got a lot of pats on the back. He got the money, which probably helped him from a commercial sense, from a business point of view, that, here's this reward for doing this effort. And this is where it's really important when we're dealing with change, especially when you're going to want to grow your revenue and profit, is having that belief in yourself. Because there'll be a lot of things that get in your way, that the road will not be as smooth as you think it is. The road will be normal. But a lot of times we misunderstand what normal is. We have this optimism bias. We expect things to go amazingly, everything in our favor and no problems whatsoever. But the reality is there will be challenges, and having that belief in yourself to keep getting back up and moving forward whenever things, the normal things that are going to happen, that's what you really need to have. And the other thing that he did that really stood out for me is he noticed and used what was available. So there was a time there, he mentioned he worked for an advertising company, drawing advertisements, drawing theatre programs and catalogues. Now that's probably not the most exciting thing. So here he's drawing popcorn and stuff like that. Now that's probably not the storytelling that he wanted to be doing, but it was an opportunity for him to deliver, work, and develop his craft. So he continued to do that all the way through. So Walt Disney, a person that's done exceptionally well, if you look around at what he created and the entertainment and things that he's shared with the people of the world, he went through a lot of process to get there. He had a couple of failed businesses, and he adapted all the way through so that he was able to develop a huge amount of revenue and grow his profit. So we'll take a quick break and we'll be back on the other side of that. Talk to you soon.
For me, it's always been important to give back and help others, which is why I've made education material available for free at damianandrews.com. You can learn the skills of how to be a great leader, or how to be more innovative, how to be a great presenter, how to hold effective meetings, how to get pay rises and keep getting pay rises, learn to remember names and faces, and build your confidence. Plus, there's much more. Just visit damianandrews.com and go to the media page. You'll get instant access. And remember to help someone else as well by sharing the material with them. Always remember, it's not what you get in life that makes a difference, but what you give. Visit damianandrews.com to to access this information.
Hello and welcome back. Damien Andrews, growing revenue and profit. And we move into our next segment. This is question time, where you can email us or email me and send me a question. You send that email to ask@damienandrews.com. And so what I've got today is got an email that says, I have a retail fashion business with 3 stores and 25 employees. I've been trying for many years to implement changes. However, none of them stick. I'm constantly dealing with complaining staff I'm constantly dealing with complaining staff that don't like how the business is run. A day doesn't go by where someone doesn't come up with another brilliant idea, I'm not sure whether that's sarcasm or not, to make the business better. But when it comes to doing it, nothing happens and people go straight back to the old ways. I'm not complaining here, as many of the ideas they come up with are really great. So he's talking about, yes, all right, so they do come up with a lot of great ideas. I'm sure if we could just make some of them stick, then everyone would feel much better. Can you give me some advice on how to make some of these changes stick? You're not alone. This is not a common problem that is incurred by people within business, certainly business owners. Nearly all leaders have to deal with complaints. Frustration of employees is common, and the attitude is something that you have to deal with. And I'm going to, from my perspective, when we talk about that, about all business owners need to deal with change, one of the things that I want to share here is, I have a collection of little snippets from videos that stand out for me. And one of those snippets is from the movie Saving Private Ryan. And they're walking along, and there's a whole bunch of people asking, and they ask the captain, which is Tom Hanks' character, and say, look, Captain, don't you ever complain? And he explains, no, there's a chain of command. Complaints go up, not down. So, you complain to me, I complain to my captain, and so on and so forth. So he's explaining that as he was going through. And this is really critical to understand too, from that perspective as a business owner, when dealing with that is that the complaints do go up. So you have to have a bit of a thick skin to deal with that, because you will get lots of complaints. Now, having said that, it's important to recognize that when employees complain, and I'm talking about the majority here, you'll always have some of those employees that are not great, that are really, they shouldn't be there. And they're the kind of employees, as quickly as you can, you want to move them on to your competition. Recommend that they work somewhere else, generally with your competition. But majority of employees actually really want to do a good job. What they are is they're frustrated with their ability to do that, which is generally something to do with the systems in place. So that is the first thing to recognize, that when they're coming to you with problems, you need to shift your mindset that these aren't just problems. They're not problems. They're opportunities for you to help them do well, because that's why they're bringing them to you majority of the time. So there are exceptions to the rule, but most people will want to deliver, do really well while they're working with you, especially if they've been there for some time. They really care about your business. And so they're looking for how to do that. And what you're also dealing with here is the habit, changing of a habit. Now, changing of a habit is a bit of a challenge, because it's not easy to change. Well, when I say it's not easy, the system for changing habits is not that difficult. It's a process of repetitive action. So it's having the discipline, and that's where the not easy part is you've got to be clear about what you want to achieve, and then from there you can make that habit change and make it stick. But you've got to make it a habit. Now, a habit takes roughly around 28 days. So allow a month, round figures. So allow a month that a new habit takes to form. And what that is they say 28 days is because generally after you've what they're looking at is inside your brain, when you're making that change, the wiring in your brain for that to change takes a number of different connections. Again, it needs to connect, it breaks, connect, break, connects, break. And so it needs those connections. And finally, after, on average, 28 times, it actually connects and sticks. And that's how that habit is formed. It's your brain changing the way it's thinking. So what you want to do to make that in a team environment, to make that stick, and what I do with companies is when I go in there to work on changing those habits, first thing I do is I organize, when talking about changing a behavior or implementing change, is I call it a continuous improvement meeting, but you can call it whatever you'd like. But I call it a continuous improvement meeting. And two things I do with that. One is I keep it short. So it's definitely under half an hour. It starts on time. It's mandatory. What I find is even though it's mandatory, a lot of people don't turn up initially, which is fine. Don't kick up a stink and just let it go. It starts on time. It finishes on time. Now, so that's really critical because you want people to be, most people, and that's a whole different topic, is meetings, most people's meetings are not very well organized. They run over time. People are wondering what they're doing. So really, to make this work, you need to make sure that you start on time, finish on time, and you have a very specific structure that you follow. Because then we're coming back to this adapting to change. People don't like change. And they're going to move away from it. So you need to give them that confidence. And as I said, I make it a mandatory meeting. I find a lot of people don't turn up initially, but then as the people that do turn up, they become more comfortable with the process. They share that with other people within the company, and all of a sudden, people are becoming more confident about it. And what I find is actually the staunchest people that oppose this, usually it's some tough guy that works out, doesn't want to, be told what to do, they become actually the biggest supporters. So how do we run this meeting? Well, the first meeting I do is I email it around and say, this is what we're doing. We're going to have this meeting, and I want you to come up with just two problems within the company. And make sure the meeting, when you do this, you're not inviting 40 people because otherwise it's going to be too big. But they've got to come up with two problems. Usually two to five, depending on the size of the company. But I say two problems, bring your highest two problems that you've got to deal with. And then we get everyone in the room. So we go around the room, there's 10 people in the room, everyone gives their two problems. And I say, okay, let's prioritize. So I'm on the whiteboard, I write that up on the whiteboard and say, okay, we've got these problems. Now let's rank them. What do you think as a group, as a collective, what is the most important problem, the biggest issue? What is the biggest issue that you have to resolve right now? So we go through that and we put that in order, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way down to order. And I say, okay, and we all agree, everyone's agreeing and saying, is this the order that's most important? And then I ask them, and this turns out to be a critical question, is that I ask them and I say, now, is it realistic that we can solve all of these problems straight away? And it's a critical question because what it does is very few people come and say, yeah, we can do that straight, because it's just not possible. And they look at that and they say, well, okay, so if we can't solve it all straight away, should we focus on these couple at the top, get them sorted out, and then we work our way down the list? And I know there'll be a lot of things we need to sort through, but is that reasonable if we have that process? And everyone tends to agree. So they've agreed, let's focus on this problem. And then from that, we go, well, okay, we go through around the room. What can you do, each person? What is your task that you can do that's going to help move forward and solve that problem? And we make a list. And I'm basically, in a lot of companies, I'll just do this in Excel because it's what most people are used to, but use whatever you want as a tracking. So I might use an Excel spreadsheet and we'll have, okay, this is the task we're working on in the column, everyone's name, and then your task, your specific item that you're going to do. And we go through that. And they all put their name against that as a task that they have to have done by the time we have the next meeting next week. And so we go through that process. Now, what that really does, the underlying thing that really helps here is that what you've done is you've identified that there's a whole raft of problems. They've identified that it's not possible to solve them all. And what that does, we'll solve them all straight away. What that does is then it gives you the ability or not give you, what it does is it steps them back and they go, hang on a minute, we can't do this. So complaining about it's not really going to help. What I've found by putting this process in place, that whole complaint situation where we got lots of people complaining all the time literally disappears. It just goes. And what that part of that complaints, I think, from my perspective, what I believe is that people complain because that's how they express stress and how they express how they want to help because they don't know how to help. Now that you've given them this structure, this list of things to do, and they've got their tasks to do that. And then what I also do is the next meeting we come through, I have a no excuse policy in relation to this. It's not that you beat anyone up, that they don't do it, but it's like, if you didn't achieve it, you didn't achieve it. It's not like, and I had that on a number of times where I've actually gone in there, I've had my task to do, literally 5 minutes before the meeting, something's happened, I'd had it delivered, and then all of a sudden I couldn't deliver. So I've gone in there, first up, I've said, okay, I haven't achieved this happened, I have no excuse policy, so I got a red mark next to my name, and we go through everybody's tasks. And a lot of people, they just accept that, and it's not blame. You just, not blaming you're an idiot for not doing it or anything like that. It's just like, you didn't achieve it. What are we going to do next time? What are we going to do? And keep that focus moving forward. And then as you work through it, now, and what happens here is you keep those couple of tasks that you've isolated right up front, and you're focusing on those tasks. And over that course of the next 4 meetings, people are starting to do those behaviors. And all of a sudden, that becomes a habit. So that change happens. And so you get that change, then you get the next change. So imagine when you think about it from your organization's perspective, that you've got to deal with the top 12 problems. So we're saying 1 month to deal, a change to implement. So 12 months. If you had solved the top 12 issues within your company in 12 months, how differently will your company operate? How much will that affect your revenue and profit? It's significant. It makes a massive difference. And on top of that, as an added bonus, most people stop complaining. You stop getting these complaints coming up. You get little suggestions and things like that, but a lot of that complaining disappears. So that's a strategy that you can put in place when dealing with those issues that you're having in your store, is make sure that you run a continuous improvement meeting, run it so that it runs on time, identify what are the key changes, get everyone involved, get their agreement that this is the order of the problems that we're going to solve. And as you work through that, tick off the boxes, congratulate everyone for the work that they're doing, and all of a sudden you'll find that that whole dynamic of your organization has changed. So I hope that answers your question and gives you some useful tips to work forward. We're going to take another break, and I will see you again shortly.
Are you looking for an inspiring speaker with a different take on how to achieve success? I've spoken to audiences all around the world, showing them how procrastination doesn't exist, how there are no positive or negative events, and that thinking that way can severely slow your success. Also, how to tap into your body's serotonin and dopamine to increase your own and your team's performance. And most of all, how to be happy every day, no matter what happens. If any of this is beneficial to you or your organization, contact me at ask@damianandrews.com to learn how you can engage me to speak at your next event.
Hello and welcome back. Now today, as we talked about growing revenue and profit, we are dealing with adapting to change. And how do we adapt to change? Now, this is critical in today's environment, especially. I mean, as we talked about, we're in the COVID-19, 6 months in. There's a lot of stores that are closed at the moment. Certainly here in Melbourne, where I am, we're in a lockdown state where basically, most retail stores are shut, and we've just got the news that that's going to be extended for a little bit longer. But one of the things I think that really stands out in this COVID environment is that the amount of adaptation that has gone on, the innovation that has happened, how people have responded. And it's interesting to see that. I find from that perspective, people always have that ability. They can adapt really quickly and change really quickly. They can make significant changes to improve their, I mean, in a lot of businesses' cases, their revenue stopped. It's dead. It's done. But what they've done is now they've adapted, they've changed. There's a lot of people doing it. There's so many more deliveries happening now. So they've adapted that. So that's created a whole new area of business where people, the delivery side of things has increased significantly. They've adapted and they've changed. And where, when you look at that, so they've gone from no revenue to, maybe their revenue has dropped, but they've significantly increased what they otherwise would have had, which was, zero. So to see that happen, it's really interesting to note that people have the ability to make change really quickly to grow their revenue. And this is really important to think about, to remember when you're moving forward, that you always have that ability to change. And it's really important to have a think about this when moving forward as well. I mean, the world has fundamentally changed. We're going to have to adjust. One of the key areas that will flow through at the moment, well, it's dead at the moment. There are no airfares, certainly no international, very limited international airfares, but certainly tourism has dried up. And the bigger impact of that businesses are adapting to is business travel. Now, business travel was expensive, and this is where I was reading a report that airlines are adjusting or planning on how they're going to adjust to that, because what has happened and what has fundamentally changed is that it was okay pre-COVID-19 that we spend a lot of money on business travel. People travel, they have business meetings, it was kind of accepted, the company covered it, fantastic. We enjoyed that. What has happened now, because this has happened for so long, we talk about changing habits before. We're dealing with a situation where business now has realized it can do a lot of this stuff online with your online video meetings, whatever platform you prefer to use, but people are being quite effective, and actually they're quite enjoying it. From what the meetings that I've had, people are really enjoying this type of interaction. It's certainly saving a lot of time from travel. You don't have to it's really interesting, I find, from that perspective, is that people spent a lot of time traveling, which was less productivity. You very rarely do people get things done while traveling unless you've got a chauffeur. So that really created a new dynamic that people have started to realize, if I don't have to physically be at this meeting, I can do this online. There's, half an hour to an hour travel gone in my day, which I can actually now use to get things done. Not only that, as I said, the companies have realized that they don't need to spend this money. So that's not going to go back. Business travel will not go back to what it was before because it's just too expensive. So when we're talking about change and dealing with change, we've got some key points that we can deal with here as to how do we adjust to that? How do we deal with this kind of change? The first one's going to seem a little bit odd, but realistically what you want to do is find the humor in the situation. Now, this might sound a little bit ridiculous, and I'm not talking about, have this big laugh and, make fun of it. And that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is you as the leader maintaining that element of control, that element of the focus where you're going, to remain in that, as though things are going well. I mean, when things are going well, you're in this, happy mood. You're enjoying yourself. You're making the most of it. You need to maintain that, certainly as a leader within business, because whether you're the owner of a business or whether you're a manager within a large corporation, you want to lead by example. If you're getting stressed out, then people are also going to feel stressed out and they're not going to perform as well. So when I say find the humor in the situation, find the lightness in the situation, find how, everything's okay, it's all going to work out, because that'll make a significant difference in how your team responds or how your employees, if you're the business owner. The other element to really think about here is to focus on the outcomes. And this is a whole different topic in and of itself, but from growing your revenue through change is to focus on where you want to be going. This has a major impact because when we're talking about your reticular activating system, this is the part of your brain. It's about this big. It's a little part of your brain that operates as a filter. And what it does is that filters that information. And we've all had that experience where you might have bought a new suit or, some new clothing, or you bought a new car. This is a very common one, where you buy a new car and then you drive it out of the parking lot, out onto the road, and all of a sudden you see that car everywhere. Now, it's not that that car was everyone suddenly bought that car at the same time you did. The car was already there. It was just relevant to you. And this is where it's really important to focus on your outcomes, because when you focus on the outcomes and where you're going, it makes a huge difference as to how people, what they see, what they notice. And when you do that, when you focus on the outcomes, you're able to get there much quicker. And this helps with that change element as well, because if you keep them focused where they're going, where are they going? That helps remove some of that fear, some of that stress that we talked about at the very start of the show. You want to eliminate stress as much as possible so people get focused. When people get stressed, they get these blinkers on and they can't see. So you really want people to be in that relaxed state of mind. And this is where finding the humor and focusing on the outcome makes a big difference. The other thing you want to do in managing change is try as much as possible to shift conversation away from feelings. Because again, we're talking about where people if you start to recognize these feelings of uncertainty, of stress, and start to amplify that, then it makes it more difficult to bring it back. So again, try as much as possible to steer away from conversations about feelings. Stay very objective, stand back, disassociate, and be connected with that outcome. Again, focus on the outcome. Always important, fourth one is for you to maintain your calm. Be very calm about how you're approaching things. People will feed off that and they'll be calm as well. And focus on your values, not on your fears. So, and this is not just your personal values, but also your business values. And that's a whole, if you not sure what I'm talking about, that's a whole nother podcast and we'll deal with that separately, is that, focusing on your values. What does this mean to us? What are we about? Gives that focus forward. So really, really focus on that element from that perspective. Be comfortable with flux. Get used to that. It's okay to change. And this really comes back to your self-esteem. How much do you like yourself in knowing that you can deal with the situation? You can disassociate you can separate from your behaviors and the situation to your ability to deal with the situation. We've all got that ability. We might not know what's going on. We never knew how to walk at one point in time, yet you learned to walk and move forward. You didn't know how to do maths at one point in time, and spell words and things like that. So it's all something we've learned. You have that ability to learn. So you need to separate and get comfortable with that flux. Another thing that you want to do is you really have to and this is really critical, is to understand that if you're going to deal with change, that change starts with you. You are the one that needs to recognize that, it's your mindset. How you approach it makes the biggest difference in the world to dealing with change. And this is where it's really, really important to take that time, take a few deep breaths, relax, focus, again, coming back to the throat, find the humor in the situation, focus on the outcome. What are your values? Get focused, really focused in that, get clear about that, because then you can move forward. We talked about before, to deal with change, one of the ways to stay ahead of change is have that system of continuous improvement. And earlier on in this podcast, I gave you examples of how to set up a continuous improvement program. So this is when you're dealing with change. What you really want to do is, you said, find the humor, make it light, keep it focused, so people are not getting these blinkers on and starting to stress out. Because if they start to stress out, they're not going to perform very well. And certainly from your perspective, you're not going to perform well. Focus on the outcomes. Really stay focused. This is the outcome. Don't worry about the fear. Move fear away. Focus on the outcome. This is where we're heading. We'll keep getting there. Maintain your calm. Move away from the feelings. conversations about feelings. You can deal with that separately if you go out, have some drinks or whatever after, but in that moment, really stay focused on the feelings. Keep your vision on the future. Be comfortable with flux. Accept that, you can have that confidence with yourself. Have the confidence that you can deal with change. You can become a change master and that it's your attitude. Your attitude towards change is what makes the difference. You need to have that attitude that it's going to be good. This is useful. We can all move forward. So this is adapting to change, how we can deal with things. And when you can deal with change, you can really grow your revenue and profit because the world is constantly changing. It will constantly evolve. And for you to even just maintain your current revenue, you need to adapt and change to what your competition is doing. But to grow your revenue and profit, you really need to think about this, operate from that perspective so that you're ahead of the curve and certainly ahead of your competition. So let's take a break and we'll be back shortly.
Large companies pay a lot of money to make continuous improvements so their revenue and profit grows. Now, I've developed many of the tools that these companies use, and I've seen how much money they spend to get access to these valuable resources. Now, not everyone has the same high budget as these organizations, but I wanted to make a more economical version of this material available to you. So I created Baby Dragons. This is for people whose budget doesn't extend to $100,000 for the Breathing Fire program. Baby Dragons gives you all the fundamentals so you can immediately increase your revenue and profit. You and no more than 5 others will get 1 full day with me and then one-on-one support for the following 3 months. Now, Baby Dragons is for people who are serious about increasing their revenue and profit, but may not have the big budget of large organizations. There are no set dates. If it's right for you, I'll schedule my time around your needs. Baby Dragons costs $2,000 US, and if you'd like to learn more, email me at ask@damianandrews.com.
Hello and welcome back to Damian Andrews, Growing Revenue and Profit. Today's quote: "The greatest discovery of all time is that a person can change his future by merely changing his attitude." Oprah Winfrey. And this is where really we come back to this important thing. This is the fundamental. Adapting to change so that you can bring in higher revenue and profit has its foundation in your attitude. And this is where, your attitude really affects and it really influences all your actions. So to implement change, you really need to have that right attitude. And this is where we're coming back to your reticular activating system. It is really, really critical to get that working on your side. And, drawing from Sun Tzu talked about having all your parties, all your soldiers aligned with the same purpose. You really need to focus on making sure that alignment's there. But that's not just the case with people external to you. What you really need to do from your perspective as the leader or manager, again, if you're in a large organization, the same principle applies. You need to get up here. Your mind, the thoughts that you have all need to be aligned. And this is where it's really important to get your attitude right. Because then your reticular activating system, you get very focused on where you're going, what you want to achieve. And once you've got that happening in your brain, then you can stay calm and relaxed. That stress is gone. And you can stay focused on finding, what do I do? How do I implement this change? What are the actions I can take to get me where I need to go? And that's really, really critical. And the thing is, if you put on, let's call it a crappy face. I'm going to be, angry, I'm stressed, God, I can't deal with this. That makes it really difficult to change and grow that revenue and profit. Because what happens there is your brain shuts down. You're going into your fight or flight mode. So when you're stressed, you're moving back into that fight or flight mode within your brain. I mean, you have generally 3 options. You're either going to fight, flee, or freeze. Now, the first one, fight, is really rare. I mean, very few animals and human beings do that. Why? Because there's a high risk you're going to get hurt. Even if you do win, there's a high risk you're going to get hurt. So most of it is flee or freeze. So if you're in that state where you're under stress, this whole fleeing is a real problem, because you're not going to be able to solve the problem. Even if you freeze, you can't see ways to solve the problem and move forward. And that really makes it hard to grow your revenue and profit. You're in this frozen mode where you can't think outside the box. And that's what change is about. Change isn't about doing, just shuffling things around and pretty much doing the same thing. Change is about identifying new ways of doing things, of innovation. And that's another whole different topic. So refer to Innovation Podcast in that regard. But you really need to focus on that relaxing and staying calm on your attitude, so that you can see these other options of moving forward. The other element that's really important too is to consider the health implications. I mean, when you think about it, something to think about, but the fact is that when you're stressed, your body produces chemicals that are not helpful to you, that do harm you. And this is and you cannot perform for lengthy periods of time. There's lots of people that I've met over the years that actually have, some people have given themselves diabetes as a result of the constant stress and the way they were living their life. These things, well, that's what the doctors informed them. I'm not the doctor there, but from what they were told is the way they were living their lives, that stress caused illnesses within their body. So it's really, for your own sake, your attitude when dealing with change. When change happens, first thing to do is just relax, take time, and really adjust to that. So remember that your mindset, your attitude, is the precursor to how you'll do things. And as you've heard of, thoughts are things, the law of attraction. It doesn't matter what name it goes by, but that's a fundamental element of dealing with change. How you adjust to the change is going to be driven by your own attitude. So really focus on that attitude. All right. So that pretty much wraps up today's show. It's been a pleasure being here with you. If you do have a question about growing revenue and profit, feel free to email it through to ask@damianandrews.com. Always remember the fundamental keys. 1, choose what you want. That's really critical. You have the power to choose. Identify the high impact tasks. Do that first. Then number 3 is do those high impact tasks. And then the 4th step is to face and overcome your supreme ordeal. And what that means is that if you want something different, you need to evolve and do different behaviors. You won't get the same thing over and over again. You won't get a different result if you're doing the same thing over and over again. So remember that you have unlimited potential to change the world for the better. Looking forward to seeing you next time. I'm Damian Andrews, and as always, sliding elephants through eyes of needles. See you next time.